Engines of thunder, the birth of a legend. The roar of engines shattered the silence above France. It was April 8, 1943, and 27,000 feet above the clouds, death waited in the thin, frigid air. But long before any pilot ever felt the rush of cold wind across their face or the tremor of a .50 caliber machine gun, the story of the P-47 Thunderbolt began not in the sky, but in the minds of engineers and dreamers back in the United States. The United States in the early 1940s was a nation preparing itself for war it had yet to fully enter. The threat of Axis forces in Europe and the Pacific loomed like a shadow over the Atlantic, a shadow that demanded innovation, power, and courage. Amidst this growing tension, a small but determined team of engineers at Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, New York, embarked on a journey to create an aircraft unlike any other, a fighter that could dominate the skies with unmatched firepower, speed, and durability. The P-47 was born from necessity, yet designed with audacity. It was a hulking figure among its peers, its fuselage wide and muscular, armored to withstand the fury of enemy fire. Its engine, the monstrous Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, churned out over 2,000 horsepower, propelling the aircraft to speeds exceeding 430 miles per hour. To the casual observer, it was a machine, cold and metallic. But to those who understood it, the Thunderbolt was poetry. An elegant storm of raw power, a flying fortress that could dive, turn, and strike with devastating precision. Even before it left the assembly lines, pilots and engineers debated its potential. Would such a massive aircraft prove too cumbersome? Could it survive the relentless dogfights over the European skies? History would soon provide the answer. Training for the P-47 was not for the faint of heart. Pilots, often fresh out of flight school, faced grueling exercises designed to test the limits of both human and machine. Instructors drilled into them the essentials: how to handle its heavy frame in tight turns, how to maximize its dive speed without tearing the airframe apart, how to use its formidable armament to obliterate enemy fighters and bombers alike. And then came the real test, the sky over Europe, where every mission could be a dance with death. Engines of thunder, the birth of a legend. The roar of engines shattered the silence above France. It was April 8, 1943, and 27,000 feet above the clouds, death waited in the thin, frigid air. But long before any pilot ever felt the rush of cold wind across their face or the tremor of a .50 caliber machine gun, the story of the P-47 Thunderbolt began not in the sky, but in the minds of engineers and dreamers back in the United States. The United States in the early 1940s was a nation preparing itself for war it had yet to fully enter. The threat of Axis forces in Europe and the Pacific loomed like a shadow over the Atlantic, a shadow that demanded innovation, power, and courage. Amidst this growing tension, a small but determined team of engineers at Republic Aviation in Farmingdale, New York, embarked on a journey to create an aircraft unlike any other, a fighter that could dominate the skies with unmatched firepower, speed, and durability. The P-47 was born from necessity, yet designed with audacity. It was a hulking figure among its peers, its fuselage wide and muscular, armored to withstand the fury of enemy fire. Its engine, the monstrous Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, churned out over 2,000 horsepower, propelling the aircraft to speeds exceeding 430 miles per hour. To the casual observer, it was a machine, cold and metallic. But to those who understood it, the Thunderbolt was poetry. An elegant storm of raw power, a flying fortress that could dive, turn, and strike with devastating precision. Even before it left the assembly lines, pilots and engineers debated its potential. Would such a massive aircraft prove too cumbersome? Could it survive the relentless dogfights over the European skies? History would soon provide the answer. Training for the P-47 was not for the faint of heart. Pilots, often fresh out of flight school, faced grueling exercises designed to test the limits of both human and machine. Instructors drilled into them the essentials: how to handle its heavy frame in tight turns, how to maximize its dive speed without tearing the airframe apart, how to use its formidable armament to obliterate enemy fighters and bombers alike. And then came the real test, the sky over Europe, where every mission could be a dance with death.
By late 1943, P-47 squadrons were deployed across England, each aircraft a sentinel of steel and courage. The Thunderbolt quickly earned a reputation among both Allied and Axis forces. Enemy pilots whispered of its resilience. It could absorb hits that would down lesser fighters and still return its pilots safely to base. Ground crews revered its engineering. Though maintenance was complex, every repaired aircraft brought a renewed chance for survival and victory. Every sortie told a story. One pilot recounted diving through clouds to intercept a squadron of Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Bullets tore through the wings, and flak shredded the fuselage, but he pressed on, guns blazing, and watched as one by one, enemy fighters spiraled into the fields below. Another described the terrifying cold of high-altitude missions, where oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. Frost formed on the cockpit glass, and every heartbeat was a reminder of the fine line between life and death. Yet, the P-47 was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol. To the Allied forces, it embodied technological superiority and unwavering resolve. To the pilots, it was a companion in solitude, a metallic guardian soaring through endless blue skies, a partner in the violent ballet of war. And so began the legend of the Thunderbolt, not just as an aircraft, but as a testament to human ingenuity, bravery, and the relentless pursuit of victory. Every rivet, every roar of its engine, every flash of its guns over foreign soil contributed to a legacy that would echo long after the war had ended. Into the maelstrom, first missions over Europe. The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of England when the engines of the P-47 Thunderbolts roared to life. Smoke curled from the exhausts like spectral fingers reaching toward the sky. On the airfield, mechanics hurriedly performed last-minute checks, their hands slick with oil, faces lined with tension. Pilots climbed into their cockpits, hearts hammering against ribs, minds sharpening with the weight of anticipation. Today, they would cross into enemy territory for the first time.
Flight Lieutenant James Jimmy Harrison adjusted his oxygen mask, fingers trembling slightly despite years of training. Around him, other pilots checked instruments, flipped switches, and muttered quiet prayers. Beyond the airfield, the English countryside stretched into misty infinity, peaceful and oblivious to the storm that awaited above. For Jimmy, every mission felt like stepping into another world, one where clouds could conceal death, and every shadow could be the last thing he saw. The Thunderbolts took off in formation, wings glinting in the pale morning light. At first, the climb was smooth, almost serene. The massive engines hummed in perfect harmony, a lullaby that belied the chaos to come. Pilots exchanged hand signals through their canopies, thumbs up, a flick of the wrist, and then, beyond the horizon, they spotted the first enemy aircraft. Messerschmitts, sleek, deadly, and merciless. The sky erupted in a violent dance of fire and smoke. Tracer rounds streaked across the heavens like glowing serpents, cutting through the thin air at unimaginable speed. Jimmy's heart raced, fingers tightening on the throttle. He had trained for this moment, yet nothing prepared him for the sheer terror and exhilaration of combat. The Thunderbolt, massive though it was, proved its worth immediately. Jimmy dived, the aircraft trembling under the strain, guns blazing. Enemy fighters attempted to flank him, but the P-47's durability allowed him to absorb hits that would have doomed other planes. His squadron pressed on, weaving through clouds, diving, climbing, and turning in a deadly ballet where every mistake could be fatal. Below, the French countryside passed in a blur. Fields and villages tiny and indifferent under the reign of war. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the ground, flak shells bursting like deadly fireworks. In these moments, every decision mattered.
When to dive, when to climb, when to unleash the full fury of the Thunderbolt's 8.50 caliber machine guns. And yet, amidst the chaos, there were moments of stark, surreal beauty. Jimmy recalled a fleeting instant when he broke through a cloud layer and sunlight flooded the cockpit. The world below shimmered with fields of green and gold, rivers winding like silver ribbons. For a heartbeat, war seemed impossibly distant. And then, with a sudden jolt, reality returned as tracer rounds ripped past his wingtip. Some missions ended in triumph, enemy aircraft destroyed, towns liberated from impending danger, comrades returning safely. Others ended in tragedy, the sky claiming men who had been friends just hours before. Letters would later arrive at homes across the ocean, carrying news that no family should bear. Names of sons, brothers, and fathers etched into memory, lives extinguished in the thin, unforgiving air above Europe. Through it all, the P-47 Thunderbolt earned its reputation as a flying fortress. Its armor allowed pilots to survive hits that would have shredded other fighters. Its speed and agility enabled daring maneuvers, turning near-certain death into narrow escapes. And its firepower could obliterate anything in its path, a grim reminder to the enemy that this was not a plane to be trifled with. After each mission, pilots returned to base exhausted and shaken. Mechanics greeted them with relief, patching holes, replacing shattered glass, and performing the intricate repairs that kept the Thunderbolts in the air. In the mess halls, stories were exchanged in hushed tones, tales of bravery, luck, and sheer terror. Bonds were forged in the crucible of battle, friendships solidified by shared danger and the unspoken understanding that survival was never guaranteed. By the end of that first summer of missions, the Thunderbolt had transformed from a mere aircraft into a legend of the skies. Its pilots carried the weight of history on their shoulders, flying into the maelstrom with courage, skill, and an unbreakable resolve. Each sortie etched a story into the annals of war, a story of humanity confronting death, powered by engines of thunder and wings of steel. And yet, even as victories mounted, the war raged on, relentless and unforgiving. The skies over Europe were vast, and each mission was just one chapter in a much larger story, a story that would test the limits of every pilot, every engineer, and every dream of freedom in a world consumed by fire.
Brotherhood in the skies, courage, loss, and legendary missions. The days blurred into one another, each sunrise bringing a new mission, a new test of courage. At first, the adrenaline carried the pilots forward, shielding them from fear. But as weeks turned into months, the harsh reality of war began to seep into their bones. The sky, once a vast playground for daring maneuvers, became a domain of constant vigilance and calculated risk. Lieutenant Harrison had begun to understand the strange rhythm of combat, the heartbeat of anticipation, the violent crescendo of engagement, and the deafening silence afterward. His squadron, now a tight-knit unit of 20 pilots, had developed an unspoken code. Eyes met across cockpits, a subtle tilt of a wing, a flicker of a hand, signals that conveyed more than words ever could. In those moments, the pilots were more than colleagues. They were brothers bound by shared danger and an understanding that survival depended not only on skill, but on trust. One morning, the squadron received orders for a daring strike deep into occupied territory. Their target? A heavily fortified munitions depot that supplied the German war machine. Intelligence suggested heavy flak defenses and multiple enemy fighters patrolling the area. There was no room for hesitation. Every pilot knew that failure could mean death, and not just for themselves, but for the men and women relying on their mission's success. As they ascended into the pale dawn, the world below seemed deceptively serene. Villages slept under misty blankets, rivers snaked through fields, and the distant forests hid secrets that could change the course of a mission in an instant. But the peace was an illusion. Soon, the sky erupted in violence. Anti-aircraft fire clawed through clouds, sending showers of shrapnel into the heavens. Enemy fighters streaked toward them like black shadows, engines screaming, guns blazing.
Harrison's Thunderbolt shuddered under the weight of the assault. Tracer rounds danced dangerously close, and explosions rocked the sky in every direction. Yet in the chaos, his training and instinct took over. He dove, rolled, and climbed with precision, coordinating with his squadron through silent signals and practiced maneuvers. One by one, they engaged the enemy fighters, weaving a deadly web of aerial combat. Amid the roar of engines and the staccato of machine guns, moments of human fragility shone through. Pilots shouted names over the radio, urged comrades to escape flak bursts, and shared quick, whispered prayers. Each successful maneuver, each downed enemy plane brought relief, but it was fleeting. Losses were inevitable, and the death of a squad mate was a wound that no mission could heal. Harrison watched his best friend, Sergeant Tommy Blake, take a hit. Flames licked the fuselage of Tommy's Thunderbolt as he struggled to regain control. In those seconds, Harrison felt a surge of helplessness, a bitter reminder of the fine line between life and death. With a heavy heart, he saw Tommy bail out, parachute blooming like a fragile flower against the smoke-filled sky. Later, they would learn Tommy had survived, but the scare left a scar that would never fully fade. Even as fear and loss shadowed their missions, the pilots found strength in each other. They celebrated small victories, a successful sortie, a perfect landing, or the rare moment when the sky seemed peaceful. Nights were spent in tents and barracks, sharing stories and letters from home. Laughter and camaraderie became shields against the ever-present specter of war. Some missions became legendary, whispered among airmen as tales of skill, bravery, and sheer luck. One such mission involved a formation of 20 Thunderbolts striking a critical rail junction. Enemy fighters ambushed them mid-flight, but coordinated maneuvers and unwavering precision turned what could have been disaster into triumph. The pilots returned with their aircraft battered, but intact, carrying proof that courage, discipline, and trust in one another could defy even the most daunting odds.
Yet war's weight was inescapable. Harrison learned to navigate the constant tension between fear and duty, grief and hope. Each mission tested not only the limits of human endurance, but also the bonds forged in the skies. He understood that survival was never guaranteed, only earned, moment by moment, through skill, courage, and unwavering solidarity with the men beside him. By the end of that year, the squadron had earned a reputation that spread far beyond the base. Pilots who once faced the unknown with trepidation now carried themselves with a mixture of hardened resolve and quiet pride. The P-47 Thunderbolt was more than a machine. It was a symbol of defiance, a vessel of human will soaring above the clouds, carrying men who dared to confront death in the pursuit of freedom. And as Harrison stared at the horizon, watching the sun set over a war-torn landscape, he felt the truth of it deep within, that in the vast, merciless skies, amidst fire and steel, brotherhood and courage were the only constants. Every mission written into memory, every daring maneuver, every narrow escape, became part of a story larger than any one man, a story of resilience, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of victory. Fire over Europe, daring strikes, and the weight of duty. The spring of 1944 brought with it a new intensity. The Allies were preparing for a decisive push into Europe, and the skies over France and Germany became arenas of relentless conflict. Harrison and his squadron were no longer green pilots testing their mettle. They were seasoned veterans, battle-hardened, yet acutely aware of how quickly fortune could turn. Orders came down for a series of high-risk raids targeting German supply lines and fortified positions. Intelligence warned of increased flak concentrations and more experienced Luftwaffe pilots patrolling the corridors of the sky. These were missions that demanded precision, nerves of steel, and absolute trust in the men at one side. On one mission, the squadron was assigned to destroy a heavily defended railroad junction vital to German troop movements. As they climbed to 25,000 feet, the sun glinting off their P-47 Thunderbolts, Harrison could feel the tension vibrating through his aircraft. Each pilot ran final checks, their movements sharp and methodical. The radio crackled with last-minute confirmations, and the familiar camaraderie of shared purpose steadied their nerves.
As they approached the target, enemy fighters descended like shadows from the clouds. Harrison's squadron immediately engaged, weaving through bursts of flak and cannon fire. The sky was a chaotic canvas of smoke, fire, and the screaming roar of engines. Every maneuver was a gamble. Too slow, and the plane could be shredded by flak. Too fast, and coordination with the squadron could be lost. Harrison found himself locked in a deadly dogfight with a Messerschmitt Bf-109. Each twist, dive, and climb was a ballet of life and death. Tracer rounds painted lines across the sky, some striking dangerously close to his cockpit. Heart-pounding, he maintained focus, remembering Tommy's narrow escape months earlier. Every skill honed over countless sorties now dictated his survival. With the combination of precise aim and daring maneuvers, he downed the enemy fighter, feeling a grim satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that each life lost, enemy or ally, was part of a larger, devastating conflict. Below, the rail junction erupted in fire and smoke as bombs hit their mark. The mission, though costly in tension and exhaustion, succeeded. Pilots cheered over the radio, a brief moment of triumph amid the ongoing chaos. Yet celebrations were tempered. Some returned with damaged aircraft, others with minor injuries. Harrison touched the controls of his Thunderbolt, feeling the vibration and wear of countless missions, a reminder of the fragility of life suspended in the sky. Even in moments of victory, the psychological weight of war pressed upon the men. Letters from home were read and reread, memories of families and loved ones fueling both courage and longing. The nights were spent repairing planes, debriefing missions, and trying to find sleep amid the distant rumble of artillery. Harrison often found himself staring at the stars, contemplating the thin line between survival and loss. Each day, each mission reinforced a profound understanding. War was not just about strategy and firepower. It was about endurance, spirit, and the human cost borne silently in the cockpit. As months passed, Harrison observed the toll war took on even the most resilient pilots. Some became quiet, withdrawn, their eyes haunted by near-death encounters. Others displayed a reckless bravado, pushing limits in ways that bordered on self-destruction. Through it all, Harrison learned the delicate balance of leadership, camaraderie, and personal resilience. He became a steadying presence for younger pilots, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes simply a listening ear. One afternoon, intelligence reported a major assembly of German tanks and artillery near a strategic river crossing. This was a high-value target, an opportunity to cripple enemy operations, but it was also heavily defended. Harrison and his squadron were briefed meticulously, plotting entry and exit points, coordinating altitude and speed, and assigning roles for each Thunderbolt.
The past echoes. The waiting room clock ticked louder with each second, a cruel reminder that time moved forward even when their lives had been thrown into chaos. Kayla's head leaned against her mother's shoulder, her eyes swollen from crying. Monica stroked her hair gently, though her own body trembled with silent rage. The buzzing lights above flickered. The stale air smelled faintly of disinfectant. The police station was a place built for breaking spirits, and Monica could feel it trying to do just that. But instead of collapsing, her mind began to drift. Back. Flashback. David, age 10. A small boy stood at the edge of a dusty playground in Alabama, his sneakers too worn, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Around him, children laughed and shouted, but not with him. "Hey, boy," one of the older kids yelled, tossing a rock that skidded near David's feet. "Why you always walk like you better than us? You think you special?" David stayed quiet. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Don't give them your anger. Give them your silence. Your silence will shame them more than your fists ever could." But the taunts didn't stop. A shove, a punch to the shoulder, another rock, this one hitting his leg. He wanted to cry. He wanted to run. Instead, he stood taller, even as his lip quivered. That night, when he came home with bruises, his father, a man with hands calloused from years of labor, sat him down on the porch. "You held your head up, son?" his father asked. David hesitated, then nodded. His father's smile was weary but proud. "Then you already won." Back in the police station, Monica looked at her daughter now, her trembling hands, her tear-streaked face, and thought, David learned to stand tall young, and now Kayla will too. Flashback. Monica, age 16.
The mission began at dawn. Clouds obscured the sun, casting a muted light over the European countryside. As they approached the target, anti-aircraft fire erupted from below. Harrison's squadron executed precision dives, releasing bombs that found their marks. Flames and explosions raged across the fields as enemy troops scrambled to regroup. Enemy fighters descended from above, engaging in a deadly dance of speed, skill, and sheer will. Harrison maneuvered his Thunderbolt with unwavering focus, coordinating attacks and watching for squadron members in distress. When the smoke cleared, The mission was a tactical success, but not without cost. 2 planes were heavily damaged. 1 pilot had to bail out over enemy territory, and the psychological strain of life-and-death decision-making left an indelible mark on all who flew that day. Harrison realized that every mission, every victory, was tempered by sacrifice, a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Despite the hardships, moments of humanity and humor persisted. In brief respites, the pilots exchanged stories, shared rations, and celebrated birthdays in makeshift gatherings. These small acts of normalcy were lifelines, keeping morale alive amid a world dominated by destruction and death. By summer, Harrison's squadron had earned a reputation for daring raids and remarkable survival rates. Yet fame offered little comfort. Each mission carried the same weight, the same uncertainty. In the cockpit, amidst the roar of engines and the glare of tracer fire, survival depended more on skill. It required courage, trust, and an acceptance of the thin thread by which life hung in the air.
Shadows over the front. Courage amid chaos. By the fall of 1944, the war in Europe had intensified. The Allies were advancing, pushing German forces back, yet the resistance they met was fiercer than ever. Harrison's squadron was now at the forefront of these operations, tasked with missions that were as strategic as they were perilous. Each sortie carried the weight of not just survival, but the broader tide of a conflict that touched every corner of the continent. Intelligence reports spoke of an impending German counteroffensive designed to cut supply lines and slow the Allied advance. Harrison's squadron was ordered to disrupt troop movements, destroy bridges, and provide air cover for advancing ground forces. The skies over Belgium and northern France became a labyrinth of danger, with flak batteries hiding among the trees and enemy fighters patrolling aggressively. On a foggy morning, Harrison led a mission to strike a key supply depot near the Ardennes forest. Visibility was low, the mist twisting in the wind, creating ghostly silhouettes that could conceal either enemy or ally. The squadron descended into formation, eyes scanning the clouds and the terrain below. Every pilot was aware that a single misjudgment could spell disaster. As they approached the depot, German fighters appeared suddenly, emerging from the mist like shadows with lethal intent. Harrison's squadron split to engage, weaving through bursts of anti-aircraft fire. The roar of engines, the staccato of machine guns, and the smell of burning fuel created a surreal cacophony, one that tested nerves and reflexes to the extreme. Harrison found himself in a deadly duel with an experienced Luftwaffe pilot. The Bf-109 maneuvered with skill and aggression, forcing Harrison into sharp climbs, sudden dives, and evasive rolls. The world shrank to the space between his cockpit and the enemy plane, each second a test of skill and instinct. With a precise burst from his Thunderbolt, Harrison's rounds hit the enemy craft, sending it spiraling into the mist below. Relief was fleeting. Another fighter was already diving toward him, relentless and merciless.
Below, the depot erupted in flames as bombs released by the squadron tore through ammunition crates and fuel tanks. The destruction slowed enemy reinforcements, allowing Allied ground forces to advance with fewer losses. Yet the victory was tempered by the knowledge of what had been risked. One of Harrison's squadron members had barely returned, the plane riddled with flak, a stark reminder of how thin the line between life and death could be in the skies. The days that followed were a blur of missions, each with its own dangers and challenges. Harrison began to notice the subtle signs of strain among his men, tight jaws, sleepless nights, and the haunted look in eyes that had seen too much. Yet amidst the tension, moments of humanity shone through. Pilots exchanged letters from home, told stories of childhood memories, or shared small jokes to relieve the pressure. These fleeting instances of normalcy became crucial lifelines, sustaining morale in the midst of relentless conflict. One evening, Harrison sat atop a hill overlooking a small French village. The ruins of the war were visible in every charred building and shattered street. He thought about the countless missions flown, the friends lost, and the families waiting at home. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, yet he knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the resolve to act despite it.
A particularly daring mission came in late October. Intelligence had identified a concentration of German armor threatening to cut off an advancing Allied division. Harrison's squadron was tasked with destroying these forces before they could reach the front lines. The flight was long and perilous, and as they neared the target, the roar of engines was joined by the echoing bursts of flak from hidden batteries. The attack unfolded with precision and ferocity. Harrison dove into the midst of the armored column, releasing bombs with deadly accuracy, strafing tanks with machine gun fire. The ground erupted in smoke and fire. Enemy vehicles were disabled, and the division's advance was secured. Yet even as success was achieved, the cost became evident. One pilot, a young man barely 20, had been hit and was forced to bail out over enemy territory. Harrison's heart clenched, the harsh reality of war never far from his mind.
Throughout these trials, Harrison grew not only as a pilot, but as a leader. He learned to balance aggression with caution, courage with care for his men, and strategy with instinct. Every mission, every risk taken reinforced the bonds of brotherhood that sustained them through the worst of circumstances. As winter approached, the European skies grew colder, the missions more relentless, and the challenges even more severe. Yet Harrison and his squadron pressed on, determined to see the war through, knowing that each sortie brought them closer to victory and, inevitably, the chance to return home. Even amidst chaos, the pilots found strength in small victories, in the camaraderie that carried them through the darkness, and in the knowledge that their courage, skill, and resilience were making a difference in a world engulfed by war. Harrison understood that history would remember battles and strategies, but the true essence of war was found in the hearts and spirits of those who dared to fight in the skies, one mission at a time. Winter's Edge, Trials in the Frozen Skies. By December 1944, the war had entered a grueling phase. Europe was blanketed in snow, and bitter winds sliced across the front lines like invisible blades. The Ardennes offensive, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge, had begun, a desperate German counterattack aiming to split the Allied forces and reclaim lost ground. Harrison and his squadron were thrust into one of the most dangerous periods of the war, tasked with reconnaissance, air cover, and direct engagement with enemy forces under conditions that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. The mornings were defined by frost-covered airfields, frozen engines, and the sharp scent of heated metal. Harrison and his men checked and double-checked every instrument and weapon system, aware that mechanical failure in sub-zero temperatures could be fatal. The sky itself seemed hostile. Low-hanging clouds, icy turbulence, and limited visibility made every flight a test of endurance, skill, and courage.
One particularly brutal day, Harrison led a mission to intercept a German convoy attempting to reinforce the Ardennes front. As the squadron climbed into the frigid skies, frost forming on the wings and canopy, tension was palpable. Each pilot knew the risks: enemy fighters, flak batteries, and the treacherous weather. Yet retreat was not an option. The lives of thousands of soldiers on the ground depended on their success. The encounter with enemy aircraft was immediate and unforgiving. Luftwaffe fighters equipped for winter operations emerged from the clouds with deadly precision. Harrison's squadron split, weaving through bursts of anti-aircraft fire and evasive maneuvers. The sky became a chaotic ballet of aircraft, smoke, and fire. Harrison engaged a pair of Focke-Wulfs, diving and climbing to maintain the advantage. His hands ached from gripping the controls, his mind focused on split-second calculations of speed, angle, and distance. Below, the German convoy attempted to push forward through icy roads and snow-laden terrain. Harrison's bombs and strafing runs disrupted their advance, destroying tanks and supply trucks, forcing them to retreat. Yet victory was tempered by loss. One of his squadron's newest pilots had been hit, spiraling into a frozen forest below. The squadron circled, hoping for a sign of survival, but the reality of war was unforgiving. As days turned into weeks, Harrison's squadron continued relentless operations. Supply lines were secured, enemy strongpoints attacked, and the tide of the Battle of the Bulge slowly shifted in favor of the Allies. Each mission tested not only skill, but stamina. Frostbite, exhaustion, and constant alertness became as dangerous as enemy fire. Yet the men pressed on, driven by duty, loyalty, and the shared hope of seeing the war's end. Amidst the chaos, Harrison found moments of quiet reflection. Late at night, he would sit in the dim glow of the airfield, gazing at the frozen landscape, thinking of home, family, and the friends lost to war. Letters arrived from loved ones, small tokens of humanity in a world dominated by conflict. These moments reminded him of why they fought, not for glory, but for the survival and future of a world teetering on the edge.
Harrison's leadership was tested beyond combat. He navigated the delicate balance between pushing his men to succeed and protecting them from needless risk. The harsh winter had broken less resilient pilots, but Harrison's squadron endured, bound together by trust and the shared understanding that each mission carried the weight of countless lives. One night, during a rare lull in combat, Harrison and a fellow pilot, Lieutenant Callahan, huddled over maps in the frost-bitten mess tent. They planned sorties for the next day, discussing enemy positions, weather patterns, and possible contingencies. Callahan, younger and less experienced, confessed his fear. Harrison's response was steady, calm, and resolute. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the discipline to act despite it. The winter dragged on, each day blending into the next, marked by icy dawns, relentless missions, and the constant hum of engines overhead. Yet Harrison's squadron achieved critical successes. German supply lines were severed, armored divisions delayed, and intelligence gathered that proved invaluable for planning the final offensives. Through skill, resilience, and sheer determination, Harrison and his men played a pivotal role in turning the tide of winter operations. By late January 1945, the Battle of the Bulge had been contained. Harrison's squadron, though battered and weary, had survived the brutal winter, each pilot bearing scars, both visible and hidden. The war was far from over, but the experience had forged them into a unit defined by courage, loyalty, and an unyielding commitment to their mission. As Harrison looked out over the snow-blanketed airfield, he understood that victory in war was measured not just in territory gained or enemies defeated, but in the endurance of the human spirit. Each mission flown, each risk taken, and each life saved was a testament to the extraordinary resilience of ordinary men. And though the skies of Europe remained dangerous, Harrison knew that he and his squadron had proven themselves capable of facing even the harshest trials and emerging stronger for it.
By February 1945, the Allied forces were preparing for the final assault into Germany. Months of grinding winter battles had weakened the enemy, but resistance remained fierce. Harrison's squadron, now battle-hardened and intimately familiar with both the skies and the toll of war, was assigned a critical role to provide air superiority, support ground offensives, and conduct strategic reconnaissance missions deep into enemy territory. The pace of operations accelerated. Each sortie required careful planning, meticulous execution, and unwavering focus. Harrison and his pilots had learned to anticipate the enemy's tactics, to read the skies as if they were a living battlefield, and to operate with an almost instinctive cohesion. The squadron's success had become legendary, but the cost was ever present. Aircraft damaged beyond repair, young men lost, and the mental strain of constant combat. Harrison's first mission of the campaign involved escorting Allied bombers targeting rail junctions and supply depots crucial to the German war effort. Flying at high altitude, the squadron moved with precision, flanking the bombers, scanning for enemy interceptors. The sky erupted with anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighters. Harrison's plane danced between flak bursts, his hand steady on the controls, despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. He took down an FW-190 with a burst from his guns, watching it spiral toward the snowy terrain below, a stark reminder of war's brutality. On the ground, Allied troops were advancing, encountering pockets of German resistance in towns, forests, and fortified positions. Harrison's squadron provided cover, strafing enemy positions and disrupting supply movements. The coordination between air and ground forces became increasingly complex, with lives hanging in the balance on split-second decisions. Amid the intensity, Harrison's personal growth became evident. He had matured from a pilot driven by duty and adrenaline into a leader capable of balancing strategy, risk management, and care for his men.
He monitored the squadron's morale, noticed signs of fatigue, and adjusted missions accordingly, ensuring that the unit remained effective without sacrificing the well-being of his pilots.
One mission stands out vividly in Harrison's memory. Intelligence had identified a heavily fortified German command post deep within the Black Forest. The mission required precision bombing, followed by a reconnaissance to assess the damage. Harrison led the squadron, navigating treacherous terrain and low visibility caused by fog and smoke. Enemy fighters expecting the attack engaged immediately. The ensuing aerial battle was chaotic and brutal. Harrison's leadership was decisive. He coordinated evasive maneuvers, directed younger pilots away from danger, and maintained the focus of the bombing squad. The bombs struck their target with devastating accuracy, and the reconnaissance confirmed the destruction of key infrastructure. However, the cost was significant. 2 of his squadron's aircraft had been lost, and the surviving pilots bore injuries, both physical and emotional. As Allied forces pressed further into Germany, Harrison's squadron became a critical component of the overall campaign. Their missions expanded beyond combat, rescuing downed pilots, delivering vital intelligence, and supporting civilian evacuations in war-torn towns. These operations exposed Harrison to the human side of the conflict. The civilians caught in the crossfire, the soldiers' unwavering courage, and the profound impact of war on ordinary lives. During a rare lull, Harrison reflected on the journey from the early days of combat over France to the present campaign in Germany. The boy who had climbed into his first plane with nervous excitement had become a seasoned pilot, a respected leader, and a man who understood the true costs and responsibilities of war. The sky, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, had become a theater of duty, sacrifice, and sometimes sorrow. By March 1945, the Allied forces were closing in on the Rhine, with German resistance weakening but still dangerous. Harrison's squadron flew countless sorties, providing reconnaissance that guided ground advances, neutralized artillery positions, and ensured air dominance over critical areas. The cumulative stress of combat weighed heavily, but the men pressed on, united by a sense of purpose and the knowledge that the end of the conflict was near. In one of the final operations, Harrison personally led a daring mission to disable a heavily defended bridge vital to the enemy's retreat. Flying low to avoid radar and anti-aircraft guns, the squadron executed a coordinated strike with precision timing. Explosions rocked the bridge, cutting off enemy movements and providing a significant strategic advantage to the advancing Allied forces. The mission was a success, but the adrenaline-fueled exhilaration was tempered by the grim reality that many had paid the ultimate price. As spring approached, Harrison sensed the war's end on the horizon. His squadron, battered yet resilient, had become a unit defined by courage, skill, and unwavering loyalty. The experience had forged bonds deeper than friendship, and the memories of those lost remained a constant, solemn presence. Harrison understood that victory would not erase the scars, both visible and invisible, that war had left. But he also recognized the enduring spirit of those who had fought, survived, and carried forward the lessons learned in the skies over Europe. Each mission flown, each enemy position neutralized, and each life saved contributed to a broader tapestry of courage, resilience, and sacrifice that defined the final push into Germany. By the time Allied forces crossed into the heart of Germany, Harrison's squadron had cemented its place in history, not through fame or accolades, but through unwavering commitment to duty and the lives of those they served. And as the war approached its final days, Harrison looked to the skies with the understanding that while the battles were ending, the stories of heroism, sacrifice, and resilience would endure forever.
The war's end, shadows and sunlight. April 1945 brought a mix of relief, exhaustion, and uncertainty. The Allied forces were closing in on Berlin while Germany's defenses crumbled under relentless pressure from both the east and west. Harrison's squadron, though depleted, remained committed, flying high-risk missions to support the final pushes and protect advancing ground troops. Each day carried the familiar blend of adrenaline and dread, the knowledge that every sortie could be the last. The skies over Germany were turbulent with the chaos of retreating forces, collapsing infrastructure, and the desperation of soldiers who knew defeat was inevitable.
Harrison's squadron performed reconnaissance, strafed remaining strongholds, and escorted bombers targeting remaining supply lines. The missions were shorter than before, yet no less dangerous. Every town they flew over, every valley they scouted, bore the marks of war: rubble, smoke, and the haunting silence of abandoned villages. Harrison noticed, more than ever, the human toll of the conflict. Civilians wandered streets cleared of life, their faces etched with hunger, grief, and exhaustion. Soldiers from both sides, weary and demoralized, navigated the war's last desperate days with a mixture of defiance and resignation. Harrison understood that the war's end would not erase the suffering, and he carried the weight of those images with him as much as the weight of his own squadron's losses. One mission in early April was particularly harrowing. Intelligence reported a last-ditch German defensive position in a small town near the Rhine. The squadron was tasked with neutralizing entrenched artillery to allow advancing infantry to cross safely. Harrison led the attack, navigating through thick smoke and heavy anti-aircraft fire. His heart pounded as tracers streaked past, and the roar of his engines drowned out his own thoughts.
Despite the dangers, the mission succeeded. The artillery was silenced, and ground forces were able to advance with minimal casualties. But victory came with visible reminders of cost: destroyed buildings, scorched vehicles, and, for Harrison, the memories of comrades who had fallen in similar missions. The contrast between triumph and tragedy had never been more stark. As the Allies advanced deeper into Germany, Harrison and his pilots were increasingly engaged in humanitarian efforts, evacuating civilians from dangerous zones, delivering food to starving towns, and assisting those trapped in the ruins of battle. These missions were quieter, less glamorous, but profoundly impactful. Harrison realized that the final days of war demanded not only courage and combat, but also compassion and a recognition of shared humanity. In late April, as Berlin's fall became imminent, Harrison's squadron received orders to assist in reconnaissance over the city. Flying above the smoke-filled streets, Harrison observed the devastation below: shattered buildings, crumpled vehicles, and the remnants of a once bustling metropolis. The enemy's last defensive positions were crumbling, and yet the air was heavy with tension. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every corner held uncertainty. Despite the danger, Harrison felt a deep sense of resolve. He had survived countless missions, witnessed the darkest sides of humanity, and led men who had become like brothers. The thought that the end of the conflict was near filled him with both relief and melancholy. Relief, because the constant peril would soon end. Melancholy, because the camaraderie forged under fire, the bonds of shared hardship, could not be replicated in peacetime. May 1945 marked the official surrender of German forces. The war in Europe was over. Harrison's squadron, battered but intact, had flown thousands of missions, contributed decisively to the final campaigns, and earned the respect of commanders and fellow pilots alike. Yet even in victory, the emotional toll lingered. Harrison reflected on those who had fallen, the towns destroyed, and the countless lives forever altered.
Returning to Allied territory, Harrison experienced the strange dissonance of peace. Airfields once filled with the roar of engines now felt eerily quiet. Streets he had flown over in combat were slowly being rebuilt, yet the scars of conflict remained visible. He spent time visiting reunions with surviving comrades, sharing stories, laughter, and grief. The bonds of shared experience provided comfort, but also a constant reminder of loss. Harrison's own return home was bittersweet. The journey back across the Atlantic, the familiar landscapes of his homeland, and the faces of family and friends offered joy and solace. Yet he carried the weight of the war within him. The memories of firelit skies, the camaraderie of pilots, and the faces of those who never returned. He realized that coming home did not erase the past. It simply offered a new context in which to carry it. In the months that followed, Harrison struggled to reconcile his wartime experiences with civilian life. He found solace in storytelling, sharing his experiences with younger generations, and advocating for the care of veterans. He understood that the lessons of the war were not only tactical or strategic, but deeply human. Courage, sacrifice, resilience, and compassion in the face of unimaginable adversity. The war had changed Harrison irrevocably.
Yet in that change he discovered purpose. The boy who had once climbed into a cockpit with nervous excitement had become a man who understood the fragility of life, the value of camaraderie, and the enduring responsibility of those who survive. The skies he once feared and revered now symbolized freedom, memory, and the possibilities of peace. Though the shadows of war would never fully fade, Harrison embraced the sunlight of a world rebuilt, carrying forward the lessons of courage, loyalty, and humanity. The story of his squadron, the missions flown, the lives saved, and the sacrifices made, became a testament to the enduring spirit of those who fought and the resilience of the human heart. And as he looked to the horizon, Harrison knew that the story was far from over. Though the guns were silent, the skies remembered, and in that memory he found both sorrow and hope, an enduring balance between the past and the promise of what lay ahead.
Imagine driving through the quiet streets of Toledo late at night. The city is almost empty. Streetlights cast pools of pale yellow across asphalt that gleams from a recent rain. The hum of tires against pavement is the only soundtrack, a steady rhythm that eases the mind after a long day. Everything seems normal. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Then, in the rearview mirror, you see them. Red and blue lights flare suddenly, cutting through the darkness like a warning you weren't expecting. Your heart skips a beat, not because you've done anything wrong, but because instinct tells you this is no ordinary stop. Something about the way the lights slice the night feels different, intentional, calculated. The cruiser slides forward with a low rumble, tires crunching over gravel, engine growling. It positions itself exactly behind your car, a silent predator deciding when to strike. You signal, you slow, you pull to the shoulder, hands on the wheel. The world outside is still, quiet, except for the flashing lights framing your vehicle like an accusation. From the shadows, a figure emerges. Broad shoulders, measured steps, every movement precise, deliberate, and heavy with authority. There's no greeting, no preamble, just the command. Step out of the car. You pause. The cool night air feels heavier now, pressing against your chest. You know the rules. You know the protocol. You know compliance is usually the safest path. And yet in that moment, you recognize something else. This is not about safety. This is about power, about control, about ego wrapped in a badge. Minutes stretch. The officer's eyes scan you, the car, the surroundings. Every gesture, every glance communicates a message beyond words. I decide the boundaries. You obey. The hum of the street fades, replaced by the tension that coils in your stomach. The night has changed. The quiet roads now feel like a stage set for confrontation. You move deliberately, slowly, almost ritualistically, reaching for your documents. Every motion is measured, every breath controlled. You are aware of the power imbalance, of the potential consequences, yet you maintain composure. Calmness becomes your shield, discipline your armor. The officer's hand hovers near the holster. The flashlight swings in rhythm with every wordless assertion of authority.
Time feels suspended. Seconds stretch into eternity as you wait for the next demand, the next escalation. The air tastes sharp. Thoughts race, but your voice remains steady in your mind. You know the outcome is not in this moment alone. It's a series of decisions, a pattern, a choice between submission and quiet assertion. Every trained instinct sharpens. You sense the potential for everything to go wrong. You also recognize your power lies not in resistance, but in control. Control of your voice, your actions, your presence. This is not confrontation through aggression, but confrontation through discipline, through clarity, through documentation. And so, you reach for your phone. Silent, hidden, recording.
a witness in your own story, capturing the nuances, the tone, the unnecessary escalation. The moment is quiet yet monumental, a collision of authority and integrity. The officer doesn't know yet that this action, small and subtle, will define what comes next. That every choice he makes from now on will be recorded, examined, and judged. The stop continues. Each motion, each command, each pause thickens the tension. The city sleeps around you, unaware that a drama of power and accountability is unfolding on its quiet streets. The night air seems heavier with each passing second. The lights in the mirror, a constant reminder that authority is not absolute, and discipline is a quiet but formidable weapon. And so as the tension reaches its peak, the stop ends. You drive away. The officer returns to his car. The lights dim. The city exhales. Yet beneath the calm, something is shifted. A ripple has begun, a quiet momentum that will grow, moving silently through the corridors of power. What seemed like an ordinary night has transformed into the beginning of a reckoning. If you're still listening, make sure you subscribe now, because the story is only just beginning, and the night's events will set into motion consequences that neither officer nor driver could yet imagine.
The night deepens. The streetlights reflect off the wet pavement, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch across the asphalt. Every movement feels amplified in this quiet. Every sound sharper than it should be. The hum of your engine fades beneath the adrenaline, replaced by the subtle hiss of tires slowing, gravel shifting, a distant dog barking somewhere down an alley. The city is still, and yet the quiet is deafening. The officer moves with deliberate authority, each step a silent statement, "I am in control, you will comply." There's a rhythm to it, an almost ceremonial precision in the way he approaches, hand resting lightly on his holster, eyes scanning, assessing, measuring. You note it all, aware that each gesture, each pause, is part of the choreography of power. And in this silent dance, you remain poised, calm, present. Your hands rest lightly on the wheel. The officer's flashlight swings in a slow, methodical arc, cutting through the night like a blade of attention, illuminating the interior of your car with harsh, artificial light. The moment stretches. Every instinct you've honed over years of discipline tells you that control here is not about aggression, but clarity. Every motion you make is deliberate, measured. No sudden movements, no spikes of emotion, only calm observation, only precision. Time becomes elastic. Seconds stretch into minutes, minutes into eternity. You sense the officer's frustration simmering beneath the surface, a quiet storm of ego and authority ready to erupt. And yet you hold the line. Not through defiance, not through confrontation, but through restraint, through deliberate action that signals, "I am aware, I am prepared, I will not be moved by intimidation." You reach slowly for your documents, fingers brushing the leather of the glove compartment, each movement slow, deliberate, visible. Every gesture is an assertion of presence, a declaration that you understand the rules, you respect the law, and yet you will not surrender to intimidation. The officer's gaze flicks toward your movements, his posture stiffens, his jaw tightens. The tension is a living thing now, pressing against the night like an invisible weight.
A subtle shift occurs when you take out your phone. No announcement, no declaration, just a quiet act of recording. A witness for what is unfolding, a safeguard against the unknown. The flashlight's beam dances across the dashboard, catching glints of metal, reflecting off surfaces. But the camera in your hand is steady, unwavering. It captures everything. The tone, the posture, the unnecessary escalation. Every nuance of the encounter becomes evidence. The officer's voice cuts through the night, sharp and commanding. Each word is heavy with expectation, each command a test. You comply, but within the compliance lies discipline. Calm eyes, measured tone, deliberate actions. The balance of power is subtle now, shifting imperceptibly with every controlled response. You are not defiant, but you are unflinching. Not aggressive, but undeniable. The minutes continue to unfold, slow and tense, a silent struggle of authority and integrity. The city seems suspended around you, unaware of the drama taking place on an ordinary street. You notice the small details, The distant hum of traffic on the main road, the flicker of a street lamp above, the way shadows stretch unnaturally across the car's interior. Every sensory detail sharpens, every sound amplified. This is not a routine stop. It is a test, and every instinct honed over years of experience comes into play. The officer signals, gestures, demands compliance at each step, yet you move with precision. Each action is deliberate, each pause calculated. You remain calm, you remain disciplined. The tension does not break you, it refines you. You are aware that one wrong move, one flinch, one misstep could escalate the situation in an instant. And yet you hold the line, not through force, but through controlled presence, through observation, through preparation. A subtle transformation occurs in the air. What began as a simple encounter with authority has morphed into a collision of power, discipline, and accountability. The officer's initial confidence wavers, almost imperceptibly, in the face of controlled, unwavering composure. And in that moment, you know that this night, this stop will ripple far beyond this quiet road. What seems like an ordinary encounter is already becoming a catalyst for something far greater, something that would challenge assumptions, test systems, and demand accountability in ways no one could yet imagine.
The stop concludes, but the reverberations linger. You drive forward into the night, headlights piercing the darkness, unaware that the encounter has already set events in motion. The officer returns to his vehicle, unaware that the quiet assertion of presence, the deliberate act of recording, has begun a chain reaction that will unfold in the days and weeks to come. This was no ordinary night, no routine stop. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And here's the key. The quietest actions can carry the heaviest weight. A steady hand, a controlled tone, and a documented truth can challenge authority far greater than any shot or confrontation. Discipline becomes a weapon, integrity a shield, and patience the force that transforms moments of intimidation into tests of accountability. If you're still listening, make sure you subscribe now, because in the next segment, you'll see how a single decision, documenting the stop, sparks a ripple through legal channels, military hierarchy, and law enforcement itself. And trust me, what happens next will leave you questioning assumptions about power, authority, and justice.
The engine hum fades behind you as the city recedes, leaving only the quiet rhythm of tires against asphalt. The street lights blur past like pale specters, and for a moment, it seems the night has returned to normal. But beneath the calm, the tension lingers, settling into the pit of your stomach like a warning. The encounter was brief, measured in minutes, yet its weight presses heavily. Authority had been wielded carelessly, ego masquerading as procedure, and you had seen it, felt it, endured it. Back in the patrol car, the officer slouches slightly, adjusting the seatbelt as if to shrug off the tension, but the edge of uncertainty has appeared, subtle and unacknowledged. A small part of him wonders, perhaps for the first time, that something about the encounter didn't go the way he expected. He doesn't admit it, doesn't voice it. Instead, he returns to routine, logging the citation, checking boxes, filing it away like any other stop. The assumption is that the night is over, that authority has been asserted, and that the story ends here. But the night has only begun to reveal its consequences. Meanwhile, miles away, the quiet act of holding a phone, the simple act of recording, has already begun to shift the balance. The footage is steady, clear, and undeniable. Every gesture, every tone, every unnecessary escalation has been captured. What was intended as intimidation now becomes evidence. A small, deliberate action, so subtle, so restrained, has transformed a moment of power into a chain of accountability. Discipline, patience, and clarity are proving more formidable than aggression, more lasting than a badge worn without conscience. Hours pass. The city sleeps, oblivious to the ripples spreading through unseen networks. The files are reviewed, first by an aide, then through a legal team, then through channels designed to enforce oversight and justice. Each step moves quietly, deliberately, like a hidden current building strength beneath the surface. The officer remains unaware of this storm he has triggered, confident in the shield he assumes protects him. Confidence, after all, has been his constant companion. 18 years of service, a reputation that demanded respect, a career built on the presumption that protocol alone guarantees authority.
But in this case, the presumption meets its counterweight. Accountability does not shout. It does not need to. It documents, it records, it stands firm,
and it waits. The next morning, a formal complaint is filed. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, simply factual, precise, and undeniable. The video accompanies it, a silent witness speaking volumes. It travels quietly through legal channels and chains of command, reaching those who understand its significance. And suddenly, the ordinary begins to fracture. What seemed like a small, inconsequential incident becomes a signal. Whispers emerge. In break rooms, hallways, and offices, the story moves quietly, like a shadow at the edge of sight. Those familiar with the officer begin to sense a shift. The aura of untouchable authority, once unquestioned, now carries a subtle tremor. Change is coming. Not loudly, not immediately, but inexorably. At the base, the woman who recorded the encounter resumes her duties as if nothing happened. Her focus remains on her work, on the missions, the training, the people who depend on her leadership. But beneath the calm exterior, preparation continues. Consultation with legal experts, careful documentation, and review of the footage ensures that when the moment arrives, every detail will be precise, every action supported, and every claim undeniable. Discipline, experience, and foresight create a quiet but unbreakable foundation. Meanwhile, the officer goes about his routine, unaware of the unfolding consequences. Confidence remains his default, ego his shield. Yet the air is changed. Colleagues notice a shift, subtle and unsettling, in the way he moves through the precinct. The weight of unseen observation presses against him. The quiet ripple of accountability begins to intrude upon his certainty, and though he does not recognize it yet, the tide is turning. Days pass. The complaint moves through channels, quietly but deliberately. The system awakens to the implications of the recorded encounter. A formal inquiry is initiated. The weight of the law, long dormant in such routine encounters, is now applied with precision. This is not personal vindication. It is not spectacle. It is methodical, relentless pursuit of truth, of accountability, of recognition that authority carries responsibility, and that power without discipline can never stand unchallenged.
And so the narrative of that quiet night unfolds into something far greater. It is a story not only of one driver, one officer, and one stop, but of the mechanisms of justice, the subtle force of recorded truth, and the enduring principle that integrity and calm resolve can outweigh intimidation and unchecked authority. The night that began with flashing lights and the hum of tires now resonates across corridors of power, echoing lessons that are both timeless and immediate. Discipline is strength, restraint is power, and courage is often silent. If you're still listening, make sure to subscribe now, because the next segment will dive into the formal complaint, the legal machinery activated by a single act of quiet courage, and the ripple effect that challenges assumptions about authority, rank, and respect. You won't want to miss the turning point where the system begins to respond and where the true stakes of accountability come into focus. The next morning, the world moves on, unaware of the storm quietly gathering beneath the surface. The streets are busy, the office humming with routine, yet somewhere, the weight of a single night begins to ripple outward. What seems small, fleeting, ordinary, just another traffic stop, has already taken root as something larger. Accountability has awakened, and it does not move quietly. In an office bathed in the soft glow of fluorescent lights, a phone rests on a polished desk. The screen lights up, a notification flashing with quiet authority. It is not dramatic, it is not embellished, it is the first step in a chain reaction that will challenge assumptions, confront power, and redefine the boundaries of responsibility. Each click, each file uploaded, each phone call made is deliberate, calculated, meticulous. Every detail of the stop, every subtle gesture, every nuance captured in the video is cataloged, logged, and preserved. The legal team moves with quiet efficiency, reviewing footage frame by frame. The officer's tone, his gestures, his posture, everything that suggested unchecked authority becomes evidence. The unnecessary escalation, the repeated demands, the dismissive attitude, all laid bare. This is not about revenge, it is not about spectacle. It is about clarity, precision, and the assertion that no badge, no rank, no authority is a free pass. The rules are not optional, and the truth, once recorded, cannot be ignored.
Meanwhile, in the precinct, the officer carries on, unaware of the ripple he has created. Routine tasks, traffic stops, paperwork. Each action now unfolds under the shadow of unseen scrutiny. His confidence, once absolute, begins to encounter subtle resistance, whispers, glances, the quiet awareness that something has shifted. Authority, once unquestioned, now encounters the faint tremor of accountability. The complaint moves through the proper channels: internal affairs, military oversight, legal review. Each department reviews the evidence. Each person tasked with evaluation notes the clarity and precision of the documentation. There is no exaggeration, no theatrics, just incontrovertible truth, captured, preserved, undeniable. The system, often dormant in matters of minor confrontation, now awakens. The wheels begin to turn, slowly but inexorably, toward resolution, toward consequence, toward accountability. The officer remains oblivious. To him, the stop was a minor inconvenience, a routine enforcement of law and order. But unseen, a network of authority, oversight, and legal power has already taken note. The envelope of justice, quiet and precise, begins to close. The act of recording, once a subtle defensive maneuver, now becomes the pivot upon which the story turns. One small, deliberate choice sets in motion a sequence that no amount of confidence, no accumulation of years can halt. Days pass. Emails are sent. Calls are made. The complaint reaches the highest levels of oversight. Legal teams coordinate. Military command is notified. The narrative of that quiet night in Toledo, Ohio, becomes more than an anecdote. It becomes a documented case, a test of accountability, a challenge to unchecked authority. And in every corridor, every office, every line of command, the story begins to circulate, quietly but unmistakably. At the precinct, colleagues begin to notice subtle changes. Conversations halt when he enters the room. A slight hesitation in greetings, a measured glance in the hallways. Authority, once absolute, now meets awareness. The officer senses, dimly, a shift in the air, a faint tremor beneath the surface of routine. The ripple is quiet, almost imperceptible, but it is there, and it grows with every passing day.
Meanwhile, the woman who documented the encounter continues her duties, calm, composed, measured. She does not seek recognition.
The courtroom is silent before anyone speaks, a weighty quiet that presses down on every shoulder, every desk, every seat. Outside, the city hums, oblivious to the drama unfolding within these walls. Inside, every eye is fixed on the front, where truth and authority are about to collide. The air is taut, expectant, heavy with anticipation. Every whisper, every shuffle of paper, every soft creak of a chair resonates like a drumbeat counting down to confrontation. She steps into the room, deliberate, measured, not with swagger, not with bravado, but with presence, commanded by decades of experience, tempered by discipline. Every ribbon, every medal, every insignia gleams under the fluorescent lights, not for show, but as silent testimony to a life dedicated to service, integrity, and leadership. Her footsteps echo softly on polished floors, but they carry the weight of certainty.
Then comes the verdict. The courtroom fills again, every gaze fixed, every breath held. The foreperson rises, the words crisp, deliberate, echoing with the resonance of justice. In favor of the plaintiff, violation of constitutional rights, unlawful stop and detainment, actions not aligned with policy or expectations of professional conduct, accountability established, consequences rendered. The air shifts, subtle, yet undeniable. She does not celebrate. She does not raise her fists or voice. She nods once, quietly, to herself. The work is done, not for recognition, not for applause, but for principle. For every person who has faced the quiet weight of injustice. For every officer, every civilian, every witness who sees that accountability is not optional. Discipline, integrity, and preparation have prevailed. Outside the courthouse, the officer faces a new reality. The shield of assumed immunity has cracked. The weight of public record, internal review, and consequence presses down. The whispers in corridors grow louder, the awareness of peers sharper. The ripple of one quiet act has transformed a career, challenged assumptions, and reinforced a simple truth. Authority without accountability is hollow, fragile, and temporary. And she returns to her duties. No interviews, no fanfare, just work, training, leadership, mentorship. But the message is clear. Respect is earned. Power is measured not by rank or badge, but by discipline, integrity, and courage in the face of wrongdoing. Silence is the ally of the guilty. Courage is protection for the rest. If you're still listening, make sure to subscribe, because the final part will reveal the lasting impact, how one quiet act reshaped not just a career, but a culture, and left lessons for every listener about authority, integrity, and the power of standing firm.
The courtroom doors close behind her, but the echoes of that day linger long after. Outside, life continues. People rush to meetings, traffic flows, the world turns. Yet somewhere, the impact of a single, disciplined, courageous act begins to settle. Not as a headline, not as drama, but as a quiet, undeniable truth. Authority carries weight, yes, but it carries responsibility even more, and she has proven it. Back at the base, Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace returns to her duties with the calm efficiency that has defined her career. There are brief nods of acknowledgement from colleagues, subtle smiles of respect, but no fanfare. She is not a hero in search of applause. Her work has always been about service, integrity, and impact. The lesson she has imparted extends beyond the walls of the courtroom and into the hearts and minds of those she leads. In a classroom filled with fresh recruits, she stands again, this time not commanding convoys or coordinating logistics, but shaping character. Young faces look up at her, bright-eyed, full of ambition and eager to serve. They may not yet understand the complexity of leadership, the balance between authority and accountability, but they feel its presence, palpable and inspiring in the very way she carries herself. "How many of you think a uniform automatically earns respect?" she asks, her voice calm, deliberate, filling the room. A few hands rise, half confident, half uncertain. She nods, acknowledging them, then gently shakes her head. "Respect is not given," she explains. "Respect is earned, day after day, through every choice, every action, every decision, even when no one is watching. Power," she continues, "is not a shield. The badge, the rank, the authority, they are weights, not privileges. If you cannot carry them with discipline, if you cannot wield them with integrity, then you do not deserve them." Her words resonate, settling into the minds of those young officers like seeds in fertile soil. They may not grasp the full meaning now, but they will remember it when faced with their own tests of character.
She recounts the night in Toledo, not as a story of personal vindication, but as a lesson in principle. She describes the traffic stop, the unnecessary escalation, the subtle intimidation, and the clarity of choice that guided her. She emphasizes the power of documentation, of measured response, of staying calm in the face of provocation. Each detail is a blueprint for courage, a guide for the next generation of leaders. Her voice remains steady, commanding not through volume, but through authority earned by experience and integrity. "I could have panicked. I could have shouted. I could have let it slide, but I did none of those things. I documented. I filed. I followed procedure. I showed up in court and told the truth." That's leadership. The recruits lean in, absorbing the weight of those words. The room is silent, but it is not silence born of boredom. It is silence born of understanding, the kind of silence that acknowledges the gravity of responsibility, the importance of integrity, and the subtle but undeniable power of courage in action. Her lesson extends beyond the individuals in the room. It radiates outward, reaching colleagues, peers, and even those who once assumed authority was untouchable. The ripple effect of one deliberate, principled act begins to shape culture. It challenges assumptions, confronts arrogance, and reinforces that accountability is not optional, it is essential. And yet, she does not rest on victory. Her focus remains on the work, the people she leads, the mission she coordinates, and the young soldiers she mentors. The courtroom may have rendered judgment, but the real victory lies in the lessons embedded in everyday leadership. Integrity, discipline, courage, these are not just ideals. They are tools, and she wields them quietly but powerfully. She closes the folder, not with triumph, but with purpose. Lead with character, serve with integrity, represent not just yourself,
but everyone who has come before and everyone who will come after. Her words are not for recognition. They are a quiet call to action, a blueprint for lasting impact.
The officer who once assumed his authority was untouchable faces a changed landscape. Administrative reviews, internal investigations, and the public record ensure that power, when misused, carries consequences. The ripple has reached him, subtly, but irrevocably altering the assumptions under which he operated. Accountability has taken root, and the message is clear. Unchecked authority is fragile. Discipline, integrity, and courage are not optional. They define lasting leadership. And so the story comes full circle. From a quiet night on a Toledo street to a courtroom filled with silent judgment, from the flash of a badge to the glow of medals in a base classroom, the lesson is simple yet profound. Authority without accountability is empty. Courage, discipline, and integrity give power its true meaning. Silence may comfort the guilty, but truth, measured response, and unwavering principle protect the rest of us. As she steps off the platform, the room remains quiet, but the impact resonates. The recruits carry her lesson forward, the officers within the precinct carry a subtle awareness, and the city outside continues unaware, but forever touched by a quiet act of justice. And now, if you've listened this far, you've witnessed not just a story of one traffic stop, but a testament to leadership, courage, and the enduring power of standing firm. Don't forget to subscribe, because the lessons here are more than a story. They are a guide, a reminder, and a call to action for anyone who faces authority, responsibility, or the challenge of making the right choice when no one is watching. Lead with integrity, stand with courage, and never underestimate the